We want to just take this opportunity to talk a little bit about TVL Tent, which is our This Valorant Life community. And I'm going to throw it over to Adam in terms of what we're hoping to accomplish with this community.
So this community is mainly a place for people like you guys that are trying to improve at the game, to have people around you that are similar. I know when I was trying to improve at this game, it felt pretty lonely, and you really don't have like a space to, I guess, differentiate yourself from the general Valorant community. And the general Valorant community, I think, you know, has a lot of different parts of the game that we don't really enjoy. There's a lot of toxicity. There's a lot of cope. There's a lot of encouraging bad habits, and not really just, playing the game how we think it deserves to be played. And our community is about respecting the game, respecting yourself, and respecting others. So if you think that sounds good, then I think you'll be a good fit for the community.
The community is a paid community, but what we're going to be doing is that the paid community is $5 USD per month. And that goes through Ko-Fi. There's a link in the channel description, and there'll be a link below as well. We're going to pool all those funds together, and when it reaches $800, we're going to actually create kind of a scholarship where we're going to have people apply, and the community is going to help us select who will win the scholarship and get to work with Adam through one of his coaching programs. And so that's one way we think we can take what this community is doing for good, give it to someone who may not otherwise be able to afford it, and is really intentional and excited about it. And so if this sounds like something you'd be excited about, we'd love for you to be a part of it. You can join us, kofi.com/thisvalorantlife. Thanks, guys. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 47 of This Valorant Life, to all 5 of you people. We're super excited to actually do a little bit of a different video this week. We're trying to keep with the times and do something a little more of the moment. And so we're looking at this video with Tenz. We're going to kind of play it at the beginning just so you understand the context that we're talking about. And it's a short clip anyways.
Honestly, this game is just terrible. I'm not even frustrated at my teammates or anything. I'm actually just genuinely disappointed that Valorant became such a terrible game. I think they added too much stuff that's like status effects, and there's just too much bullshit in the game, right? Like I don't think anyone finds it fun when you're trying to run in, a deadlock throws a net on you, and then you have to pull it off, and then someone swings you, or you're holding an angle, neon slide, one bullet to you, kills you, and then you just smile. You're holding angle, hear the ISO shield pop, but you're in like a bad position anyways, so you have to like peek. You fight against a dude that literally blocks the first bullet, and then you die. You try to run in after your team doesn't like break trips or anything, get hit by one single cypher trip, get spammed through the smoke, die. You run in third in, your entries are in the site, you get spammed through the smoke, you die. You get scanned, just a sliver of a Sova dart, through a smoke, through a wall banged, you die. You sit on the B main entrance on Ascent, Sova buys an Odin, double headshots you, you're dead. That's like just Valorant is just bullshit after bullshit, and it's who can put up with more and bullshit the other team. I want to play an FPS game though, but I feel like the FPS games right now are just really lacking at the moment. Like I just don't like Valorant. And then Counter-Strike, I don't like the movement in CS2 compared to CSGO. Overwatch also has a similar issue to Valorant. I think it's just the nature of a hero shooter. I think hero shooters always have an expiration date before something inevitable gets added that makes the game unplayable for certain people. I'm pretty sure that is just the nature of how like a hero shooter works.
So in this clip, Tenz talks about his frustrations with Valorant, his frustrations with shooters in general. And I mean, I like Tenz. He seems like a really nice guy. I wanted to talk to you about this, Adam. Like, what are your kind of initial reactions to his take?
It sounds like the majority of his frustration like stems from the fact that it's so easy to just die without you having a chance. Like, it seems like Tenz really values the fact that you should be able to mechanically outplay your opponent, even if you are in bad situations, which we have heard this narrative, I think, pretty frequently from people that stemmed from CS, or maybe even if they played more peer shooters, like arena shooters, like Quake or something like that. So it does sound like he just doesn't like how powerful utility is and how it simplifies the outcome to just like a completely unfavorable or unwinnable situation. And I think it's valid to like an extent. I just don't really appreciate, I guess, how much emphasis he's putting on attack FPS game being a mechanical game at that level. Because like in pro play, you can argue like utility always starts first, and it's not actually a shooter until you can kind of get into the right scenario. So it's tough. I can feel for him. I think it makes sense, and a lot of maybe new players will agree with that. It's like, I don't even know what I'm dying to, you know. But I also think that there's like a lot of potential to outplay. Like that's where the strategy comes in, and I think it can be exciting to some. Like I think some people would see all of those elements and be like, "Oh my god, this is so cool!"
Like there's a lot of layers here.
With util. Yeah, there's a lot of layers. Exactly.
Do you think there's any part of this where a mechanically talented player like Tenz, part of it he's complaining because this kind of removes some of the overwhelming OP-ness of his mechanics?
I mean, I, like almost certainly, right? Like one other person that comes to mind is Matty OW is like probably the best aim trainer player, at least that I know of, and he doesn't enjoy Valorant at all. And I think it's probably because he can't actually express his mechanical skill. So, and a lot of people, I think, especially younger players, think of Valorant as like this ego mechanics game because maybe they get exposed to a lot of like Tenz and Aspaz. But like, you can't really be a good Valorant player if you don't have like the game sense side of things. And it to me, it is simplifying Valorant too much to the gunplay itself.
It's a deeper game than that, you know. I had this friend of mine who I played hockey with, and I won't name him because I don't want to shame him, but if he's listening to this, he knows who he is. Ridiculous shot. Just had like an absolute cannon of a hockey shot. Couldn't skate. So he couldn't really use the shot, you know. You would have to hope he would set up in the right place, and he would have to stand there, and you would have to set him up. He was like a walking turret, you know. He was a walking KJ turret, you know. And there's utility to that, no pun intended, but not at the level where you can dominate a game, because part of the game is being able to kind of fit all the pieces together.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, maybe to add to that is like mechanics is a huge part of Valorant, but you kind of have to like learn the game like in parallel to some point. It's like probably staggered where like you learn mechanics more importantly than game sense, and you kind of like rise the ranks with that kind of ratio. But at a certain point you'll cap out on mechanics, or like you'll get into the point of like really difficult to push past a plateau, and then that's where you have to invest your more points into game sensing. I think that's what pro play, or maybe even just like radiant play, is anyways. You will get to a point to where you can't just outgun the opponent, so you have to out util them or out position them or whatever the case may be. And maybe he's just tired of that. And I feel like a lot of people probably feel that way about the game now because they've gotten to the point to where their mechanics aren't growing anymore and they aren't progressing, and they just die to stuff and they think they shouldn't be dying to it. And maybe that's why I've seen a ton of videos on my feed, which I haven't really watched most of them, but I watched like one or two. It's like Valorant is dead, or why Valorant is so boring. Like there's like a lot more videos like this coming out. And like I would say the general consensus is like what you'll see publicly is that Valorant is dying. And I don't know if that's true, but I see the argument. But
I don't think it's true. I feel like there is a way of viewing Valorant as this almost single player experience, you know, that it's no longer interesting me. Either there's not enough new features or there's too many new features. And the overwhelming sense I get, not specifically from Tenz, but from that content around like Valorant is dying, is more just this kind of general underlying feeling of, why aren't you entertaining me, Riot? Like, you should be doing a greater job. And I think, I don't know, like my feeling is that in a competitive game, if you're looking to be entertained, a competitive 5-on-5 ranked queue game is probably not the game that is going to give you long-term satisfaction if the approach is more of like approaching a Netflix show than approaching golf.
I agree. Do you think that consensus is the norm? Like they want to be entertained? Because like, I'm not super in touch with the casual player base.
I don't know. I mean, I think there is a portion of that player base, and I think they generally fall away. You know, I think people who continue to grind ranked in Valorant or League or Counter-Strike for that matter have this kind of inherent desire to get better and compete. You know, I think on the one side, people will get frustrated that they're not climbing fast enough. And that is frustrating. Everyone wants to get better. But on the flip side of that coin, it actually reflects that Valorant and Riot is pretty good at the matchmaking where you're playing exactly at your skill level. And so unless you're truly improving, you're going to stay at the same point, right? The fact that they've been able to create these ranked queues in a way that generally gives you a 50-50 win rate means that unlike anything else in the world, if you go to pick up basketball court, you will have wildly different skill levels. You could be a little bit better or way worse. There's almost, in the absence of online gaming and things like chess or Valorant or League, there's really nothing in the world you can just go and start doing and get to compete at a almost perfect competition level for your level.
And I feel like some people take that for granted, or maybe they expect it too often, so that when they lose to a smurf or a cheater or someone leaving their game, it takes up like their entire mental space. But like for the 99 games before that, you know, it was like a really good matchmaking system. So
well, I think it's really weird, and like I even see this in myself sometimes, is like how, what's the word, unaware we are sometimes. I have played entire games where I didn't realize the other teams was playing 4v5. But if I was playing 4v5, I would know like every single round, right? But when the opposing team is, like, I literally didn't notice until it's like, oh, why did we cruise to a 13-2? Like, I'm so good. And I realized there's one guy that's like 0-14 on the other team and never clocked into the game. You mentioned taking it for granted. I just want to rewind people to the dark ages, or maybe the birth of competitive internet gaming. So when I started playing competitive Counter-Strike in like 1999, the way to get a competitive scrim, or even just a competitive game, was one, you had to have all your teammates online. You had to go into IRC, which was the internet equivalent of like Slack or Discord today. You had to go to a server or a certain channel where teams would just post banners of like, we're located in US West. We have a server, but we don't have like a voice server or whatever, or we're looking for someone with a server. So you literally had to find another team that hopefully was a similar skill level, free at the same time you are. One of you guys has to have a server, and then our voice comms, either team would have had to have bought and hosted their own voice comm server to have voice comm. Like the level of, so I mean, you would wait like 45 minutes between games because it was literally your internet scheduling, like with pigeons. Like this is not very technologically advanced, right? And so just like when I came back to League and when I came back to Valorant, my mind was blown. I was like, this thing you'd have to wait like an hour sometimes just to get one good game. You can just queue up and do it automatically. It was amazing.
On that note, is like, I wonder if the progression of games now are all evolving into that new, like Tenz was calling it like hero shooter style, where like the abilities are very strong. And I kind of feel like that narrative is maybe true. Because like when I think about my experience playing Fortnite, like they added a lot of gimmicks, and that frustrated me because similar to Ten's shoes, I was trying to think from the perspective, because I played CS before Fortnite. So I'm trying to think of like, you know, you should be able to outplay your situation with mechanical skill for the most part, and it just be a shooter. But that didn't really come to be the case. And then that Valorant comes out, and then now Marvel Rivals is coming out. or has come out and is like gaining in popularity. Like maybe the trend of gaming is just going towards this new ability focused thing, because if it was a mechanical focused game, it would put out so many players. Like I feel like it would be a very hard barrier to entry for like someone just picking up keyboard and mouse.
There's and I'm no game design expert, but if you want truly deterministic outcomes where the outcome is purely based on skill and has no variance or luck in it, then the only games you should be playing are chess. A game with perfect information and no variance, right? And there's a lot, like chess is popular, and there's a lot of people that find it popular. There's a lot of people who would never find it interesting. A lot of players don't like the idea of variance. But a lot of the things that we like, and it's one of those things where there's this kind of disconnect where a lot of the things we actually enjoy in life have variance. The reason we enjoy an underdog story in March Madness is because they're unlikely to win, but there's a potential. If the potential was zero, it's not that fun, right? And so sometimes like part of fun is having some level of variance. I think the game design piece is how do you balance that? How do you balance mechanical skill and strategy versus some level of variance where sometimes, occasionally, a worse player can win?
I wonder if that makes the viewer experience of Valorant more exciting than a game like CS, where like you can sometimes pull off a crazy play off of like util, because like let's say you're in a 1v3 in CS, that's probably not going to work out because you have to win 50-50s back to back. But if you have util, like strong util, you might be able to pull it off. So I guess I wonder if they did that intentionally, or if it's just like a side effect that the viewer experience might actually be more exciting, that utility is so strong.
I think the interesting part for Valorant, I think for me, is that similar to League of Legends, I remember someone was saying, this must have been like season 10, that the season 10 an LCS team would probably beat the season 3 Worlds teams, right? Because just the level of understanding was so far advanced. And I think there's similar parts of that to Valorant, that not all of it is fully figured out yet, that there are game patterns and ways of playing, especially at a pro level, that they're still kind of figuring out and exploring. And with the addition of new maps and new agents, that meta and the optimal play is still being figured out. And I think that for me, I think that's super interesting. And maybe that, relating back to that Tenz clip, I got this underlying sense for him that it's like fully figured out. And I think both at a game-wide level, at a pro level, and even at an individual level, I don't think that's true. Like, I think there's lots to figure out. Whether you find that journey interesting or exciting or fun, I think that's a separate question. And that's like a personal choice. But I certainly don't think it's figured out.
I mean, it just can't be figured out because we've had a different team at the top every year, you know? So, yeah, I don't know. Going back to that Tenz clip, though, like, if we kind of, like, maybe distill what he said, like, I got the idea that utility was too strong, that the game was frustrating.
Yep.
And he just did, like, you wouldn't know what you were dying
Yes.
to. And it wasn't fun.
Yes.
So what does that mean? Like, does that mean that
I wonder if it's a different, like, I agree with that assessment that of what he was trying to say. I wonder though, you know, when you die the trip, when he spams you through the smoke, like, that's not fun. I mean, it's fun if you're the Cypher player,
right?
Because you've structured, if you're the Cypher player, you've structured your defense and your util such that you found a way to get a free kill, which is kind of your goal as an anchor. So if you were to think about this from just a purely game design perspective, and again, I'm not a game designer, if Cypher as an anchor can't actually do that with his util, occasionally, if it was like 100%, that's not good. But if he can't even do that occasionally, he can't anchor. Like he has no role.
He has to play retake all the time.
He just plays CCTV, right? So I think there is an element there where that's fair and that's part of the game. I think from the attacking side, if we can't figure that out, that's part of the game within the game. I don't know. Once it happens to you once, the goal is now you understand where he's placing his trips. You can call for util to blow up the trip. You can wait out the util. You can try to fake out the util or go on site dry. I mean, I think there's just a lot of strategic elements to that kind of makes it, the way he was kind of making it sound is like there are no choices here. Like I have to just run on and die to this. And I think that is a simplification when it's always a chess match. Like the moment Cypher puts util down there and uses it in that way, there are trade-offs to the rest of the map. There's no pluses with no minuses.
One of the things I heard before, like there's this like narrative that Valorant's main skill is being able to adapt. Like the players that can adapt the most are going to be the best. And I think Tenz actually did do that in his career. Like he went from a duelist player
controller
to smokes, and I think he actually went to initiator at some point, and then he ended up on controller. So it seems like he's capable of adapting, but when he isn't a professional, and he's like maybe playing the ranked matches, it might be that sense of feeling that like ranked isn't an area where I should be trying this hard to outplay the opponent. And he just wants to play a game that's a little bit more straightforward and simplistic, where you can kind of just shoot people. And that, to be fair, was Valorant at its very early stages.
Yeah, when people thought Jet sucked and Phoenix was the best.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the way that the ranked environment is going in order to climb is just shifting away from that, mindset, at least for a player at his caliber. Maybe that's not true for, you don't hit the mechanical plateau or whatever until you're like high immortal, probably. So maybe for like 99% of the player base, what Tenz is describing isn't actually true, but because it's so easy to kind of have that experience, maybe it's blowing up more than it should.
One thing I noticed too, just with the way he was talking, is there's this concept of an internal locus of control and an external locus of control. I think we've talked about this before, right? And so an external locus of control is this way of looking at the world where you feel like things happen to you, that you don't have much control, and there's a general tendency to blame the world for things. An internal locus of control is when you feel like you have the ability to change your environment and change your and that your actions matter. And the reality is we are somewhere in the middle, but one of those is less healthy than the other one.
Yeah.
In this case, I would say the video sounds very much like an external locus of control. Riot has made a game that I don't enjoy. Riot has made it in a way that I don't like it, which, I mean, if you really don't like it, then you shouldn't play. You should just play something different. And then it's totally reasonable. But I think if you do want to like Valorant, then I think part of it is how would I play this differently? How could I think about this differently? And how do I want to choose to show up for myself? And if that means you don't want to play Valorant anymore, that's totally okay. But if you still want to be on this rank grind, then I think it's kind of being able to change your point of view, your relationship with the game, and choosing that for yourself rather than you feeling like Riot or patch notes or map additions or subtractions are doing it to you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point in the sense that like you have to choose to change your perspective on the game, because I think my experience with coaching players, especially younger ones, is like they want to be like a radiant aimer or like a ranked demon or like have really good mechanics because that's what they envision to be like a really good player. And the reality is, I think that that's only one part of being a good player. Like even if you have cracked mechanics, if you don't have like any game sense at all, you can't be a good player. You can't even be a good mechanical player if you don't have game sense. Like it's just, it doesn't work that way. But it's like, that's the more like attractive thing. So if you don't change that perception, you'll just always be stuck. And I see that constantly. Like, I mean, just recently I was going through Google form submissions for a thing that I was doing to try to gather like people for a thing. So I was looking at their trackers, and some of these people have like, no joke, like 1,000 hours stuck in the same rank playing duelist or just any role, but they're just stuck. Like they could be hard stuck diamond, they could be hard stuck immortal, whatever the rank is. I saw it like several times, and in the comment to why they could be a good choice for this thing, they said that I feel like I need some guidance. And I think it's true, they need the guidance, but like it's crazy to me that people can be stuck for that long. And I want to say, maybe generalizing a little bit, it's because they want this vision of themselves to be true, and it's not kind of coming back. And I can say this for a fact with some, like a specific client I've worked with, and you know, he climbed to Immortal. He says that he thinks he should be able to brute force his way to Immortal 3. And when he's not able to just ego swing and angle hold and take that fight, because like what would be VOD reviewing? I'd be like, why'd you take that fight there? He's like, well, I think I should be able to win that. Like if I want to be Radiant, I think I should win that. I was like, well, I wouldn't take that fight there. I would probably like get my first fight and then reposition and go for another. He was like, well, I see like these Radiant players just like get clips back to back and they can do it. So if I want to be at that level, I should be able to do it. I was like, well, yeah, like, I mean, if you were like maybe in a rank, like 2 ranks below you, you might be able to do that because like the skill, like the mechanical skill gap is so huge. But yeah, it's just interesting to me that people are stuck to this vision of being a mechanical like demon that hinders their growth so much, and I see it all the time.
It reminds me, I got into car racing, legal car racing. This is not illegal, kids. It was legal. And I remember when I got into it, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to upgrade, you know, some of my suspension stuff. I'm going to upgrade all this other stuff, but I don't want to upgrade my tires. Like, who cares about tires? Like, tires are not sexy. They're not interesting, right? And so I remember I did all that stuff and I showed up and I'm like, I'm ready to go. And I was like, you know, I'm going to be like good at this naturally because I wasn't. And when I started understanding more about my results and my poor results, I was talking to people that knew more than I did, and they're like, well, what kind of tires are you running? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm running stock tires. And they're like, well, that's not gonna work. I'm like, well, why not? Like, I can do all the other stuff. And I had this vision of how I was gonna succeed, and it was gonna be without caring about tires because they're not cool. But it's grossly incorrect, because in a car, the only thing attaching you to this earth are tires. And so the stickiness and the quality of your tires is so important if you actually want to succeed. And I think there's this idea of maybe the mechanics and the aim being like the sexiest thing, the thing that is coolest, where the strategy and noticing outs and gathering your team and mid-rounding properly, like all this other part of playing is less sexy, but those are like, that's like the tires. Like that's the rest of the game. And if you ignore that, like the physics don't change. Like gravity doesn't change if you don't believe in it. The world is still round even if you want it to be flat.
It also kind of brings up the idea to me that like people want to be that mechanical demon, but then one of the most common narratives I hear when someone approaches me for coaching is they want to be more consistent. So they want this mechanical thing and they have this vision, but the thing that's actually more painful to them is when they have poor performances and they want to kind of be a consistent player. And I kind of feel like that's like conflicting almost, because like in my experience, like in order to be a mechanical like crazy player, you are going to have like high highs but also low lows. But like we chase that vision and then we try to chase it so much, and then we realize that actually consistency is more important. And then we start working towards consistency, and then we start getting bored that we're consistent, and then we want to chase these high highs and high lows because it's more flashy, and then it's kind of like back and forth. And then if you look at like the greats of this game, we look at Aspas. He's chronically consistent. in a good way. And he does have high highs, but his lows aren't low, you know. And I mean, that's the ideal version, but I don't think people approach Valorant or performance or improving in general with the consistency first mindset.
It's so interesting. Every player, and it's because I know this sport the best, so that's why I'll speak about hockey. Being Canadian, got to keep the stereotype going.
Yes.
So every player that makes the NHL, at some point, for most of their life, actually, not at some point, for most of their life, they were the best player on their team, right? But not every player can be the best player on an NHL team because everyone else is extremely good. And so these guys get drafted into the NHL as top point scoring forwards or defensemen, and some of them will become the best player on their team in the NHL. Most of them will not. Most of them won't even be the best team on the worst team in the NHL. And so all this to say is that if you're on the third or fourth line, which means you're the bottom half of the good players, the less good players on the team, those are all top players. And so there's an element there where those players that succeed in those kind of gritty roles are succeeding because they have chosen to leave behind their identity as being top skilled players and doing whatever is necessary to succeed at a professional level to keep their jobs. And I think there's an element there of like, if you want to get to Radiant and you would only want to get there as Mechanical God, then it's very, very unlikely you ever get there. If you want to get to Radiant and you're going to do anything within your power to become a better strategic player, a better mid-rounding player, a better player playing advantages, all that stuff, like all of the other things, then you might be able to adopt yourself in a player that gets there. It just will be whatever it needs to be. And it won't be exactly what you want it to be. I don't know. Like that's what I'm kind of getting.
And I also have like a counterpoint, I guess. Like, as you were saying that, I think about the players with their unique strengths. And like, you hear the saying all the time of like, lean into your strengths and double down on your strengths. And I feel like a player like Tenz has done that. Like, I feel like in order for him to even be a good player in the first place, he had to be flashy. But maybe he's just the outlier. Like,
I think he's a mechanical outlier, and he always has been, right? Like, he was kind of like the mechanical prodigy coming from CS. So I think he always has been that. It's just that if you're going to rely on that, it's not going to be something that's trainable.
You have to rely on it off spawn. You have to rely on your talent.
Yeah, if you want to make the NBA because you're just going to hope you're LeBron James, well, you're going to know it or you're going to not know it, right? Like, you're either going to look like a full-grown man at 17 years old or you're not, right? And if you're not that, you'll know. And if you're not that, there's really nothing you can do about that in particular.
So it sounds like if you don't know that you're the next Tenz, chances are you aren't the next Tenz.
There's this saying, I think it's from Rounders, which is when you play a game of poker and you've been at the table for an hour and you can't find the fish at the table, you're the fish, right? Like, there's an element of like, you'll know. And so, I mean, it's not to see that you won't succeed. It's just like, if you're depending on your this innate God-given talent, well, then you either have it or you don't. And if you don't, and you still have these goals, then it's going to be a hard road, and it's going to be min-maxing every single other thing to get there.
And maybe that's why Tenz is so frustrated, because he's always been this mechanical outlier. So now this game that he grew to love is now going against his skill set.
I wonder who, I wonder too, how does that contrast with someone like, because Tenz has this like weight of the world on him feeling all the time, this idea that he was always going to be the best player because he was a mechanical prodigy. And I just contrast that with Jawgemo. He's got that dog in him, and he just always feels so light. When you watch him play, like, he just is laughing, he's kind of silly, and I wonder if sometimes that makes competition and competing at the highest level a little easier. if like things just feel a little lighter naturally, if that's just your temperament.
I also wonder if people's perspective on Valorant is actually positive if they aren't in the, I guess, like the, what do you call, I say chronotype, but like the category of Tenz, of like the mechanical players, like the people that are more like cerebral with the game and like really like macro, maybe they're actually liking Valorant more as the game progresses. And I feel like that trend's probably true
as it moves away from being purely mechanical. Because at the beginning it was more, but that was less because the game was truly purely mechanical. I mean, the abilities have gotten more and more complicated since the game began, but it was more that people just weren't using things to their full potential.
Yeah, it's a weird balance to strike there, for sure.
I think that's the game design piece. I think it's really hard. I think it's hard to create a game that is fun, but is introducing new things and is consistently able to capture the imagination of both a casual and a really sweaty ranked competitive player base. And that's kind of crazy if you think about it, that League of Legends has been popular for as long as it's been. Because are we at what season now? Are we at season 13 or 14?
I couldn't even tell you, but the game's been out for like over 10 years, right?
Yeah, it's over. Yeah, we're past season 13, I think. I think it's season 14. It's pretty crazy. What do you think the takeaway is from this for a viewer?
That you kind of have to embrace the game for what it is. Like whatever it is and whatever it's evolving into. If you want to enjoy the game, you have to like, you know, whatever vision you had for yourself, you have to adapt that to what the game is and not the other way around. Because like even pro players, they always complain in the off season how they practice all these months in the off season and then the meta changes right before, and then now all of that practice is wasted. And I see how frustrating that is, but also if you can kind of embrace the adaptability on the game, if you adapt quicker, you're going to be ahead of your competition. So there's an interesting part to that, is like you can't have the expectation of being this thing or doing this thing and then the game kind of throws it out you. But you know, there are, I guess, elements of frustration there that I can relate to, but for your general player, I think you just have to like the game to actually improve and actually look at the game for what the game is.
There's like this kind of like Zen thing coming through there of like, you know, like Yoda, the game is what it is. I think to just build on your point, if winning is important to you, then part of winning means being able to let go of winning the way you want to win. Sometimes that may not be, it may be cringy, you know, sometimes you may have to play shotguns more because that's going to help you win. If that's what's important to you, then play to win. If a aesthetic ideal of winning is important to you, you can chase that as well, but it might be inherently limiting if your aesthetic view of winning is just purely through gun duels. It'll just be purely limited by the ceiling of your mechanics. And if you're happy with that, that's okay. But if that's not what you want for your peak rank, then it means you're going to have to choose to be more flexible in terms of how you're going to win games and the type of player you will need to be to get to the level you want to get to.
I feel like that's exactly what happened to Paper X, because like their style was pure aggression and like they made it really, really far. And I think they hit a ceiling. And maybe that's why people root for Paper X so much. Like they have like this really crazy fan base because they're getting all that support from those people that think that Valorant should be mechanical first, the chaos, the aggression, you should be able to do that. And they did make it, to be fair, like really far in international tournaments and shown that playstyle works. But I think they're getting to a point to where that's not working anymore. And I think that's, number one, a byproduct of the direction the game is going, but also that people are just leveling up mechanically and it's unrealistic to be, you know, a mechanical demon when everyone else is leveling up at the same time.
Ultimately, I think they've been able to get where they got because of that overwhelmingness to them. And yet, I think teams have figured out how to punish that now. And I think teams have also they've lost that kind of unbeatable aura. When they got on a roll, they were kind of unbeatable. But when they weren't on a roll, they felt eminently beatable, and that's kind of where they are today.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, thanks everyone. If you like this type of episode, we can do more of them. If there's videos you want us to talk about more, or topics you want us to talk about more, let us know. As always, you can join the TVL Tent community. That's $5 a month. It's ko-fi.com/thisvalorantlife. All proceeds go towards a scholarship for someone to get coaching from Adam and level up in their game, and it'll go to someone that really needs it and really worthwhile. Thank you as always for listening. We really appreciate support. Have a great day.
Thank you.